CNN Headline News to bring you the top news, sports, and business stories from around the world every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day.
And at 24 and 54 past the hour, count on News Center 13, where the news comes first to keep you up to date with the latest breaking news from around central Iowa.
Whether news breaks around the world or around the corner, count on CNN Headline News and News Center 13 to bring it home to you on TCI Channel 30.
3 days until election night.
The challenger, the incumbent, and the wild card. 3 candidates and 3 days to go. And people who may lose their homes, victims of lenders charging exorbitant rates. This is NBC Nightly News, reported by Garrick, Utley. Good evening. It began 10 months ago in January, the month before the New Hampshire primary. Spring and summer came and went. Candidates dropped out, but the marathon continued. And now 3 men are dashing to the finish line on Tuesday. Beyond it, the White House. For Bill Clinton, the challenge is to hold off the late surge from George Bush. We begin our coverage now with Clinton. Here's John Dancy.
Bill Clinton began his last 48-hour dash in a suburb of Atlanta. His attack on Bush's economic record resonated in this city burned to the ground by Yankees during the Civil War.
Now Bush says, trust me to revive the economy. That's like hiring General Sherman for fire commissioner in Georgia.
But Clinton stayed away from an issue that seemed ready-made for his trust theme. A new memo which seems to show that President Bush knew much more about the arms for hostages deal with Iran than he's been willing to admit. Clinton left it to an aide to slam Bush.
It is a smoking gun. It's proof positive that George Bush misled us when he said he was not in the loop.
Clinton aides think the newly revealed memo needs time to work its way into the public's consciousness before Clinton can begin to make it a campaign issue. Clinton also campaigned today in Davenport, Iowa, just across the river from Illinois, an attempt to shore up his lead in both states.
The campaign has entered the phase which aides call the death march. The candidate got to his hotel at 3:30 this morning. He was on the road again by 10 o'clock. It'll go like that for the next 48 hours, with one final dash on Monday across 9 states.
Clinton strategists believe their lead is solidifying, but certain states are still fluid and a key to victory. Monday begins in Pennsylvania, then to Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Missouri, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, and home to Arkansas. The end game is also driven by the opposition. Clinton was forced to make a stop in Wisconsin today, a state where he's ahead, simply because George Bush was campaigning there, threatening to cut into Clinton's lead. John Dancy, NBC News, with the Clinton campaign in Davenport, Iowa.
The president was riding the rails in Wisconsin today. Spending the entire day in one state is a gamble when there are so many other states Bush also needs. But that was the only gamble he took today. The Bush camp feels that this late in the campaign, now is not the time to try anything radically new, especially with the president doing better in some polls. So Bush is sticking with the same message, the same attacks on Clinton and Gore, the same reminders that the nation's productivity increased slightly in the last quarter.
A lot of families are hurting, but the economy is moving, and the worst news in the world, you can see the tears coming down the face of the governor in the ozone man. You can see it when the tears trickled down her face because it came out that our economy grew for the 6th straight quarter and grew at 2.7%.
Bush thinks he has made gains by assailing Clinton's character, but today he had to defend his own character and credibility by dealing with new allegations about his part in the arms for hostages deal with Iran.
Over the past 24 hours, Governor Clinton has become panicked, and he has basically called me a liar, and the charges he makes are not new. I have responded to them repeatedly and under oath, and yet he is now latched on to these silly little charges, accusations, in a desperate attempt to stop his free fall in the polls. Well, frankly, being attacked on character by Governor Clinton is like being called ugly by a frog. Don't worry about it.
Tomorrow and Monday, Bush will be traveling too fast to go by train as he campaigns in Midwestern and Eastern states where he thinks he has a chance. His aides say he still trails Clinton but not by much. John Cochran, NBC News, with the Bush campaign in Wisconsin.
Ross Perot began his last campaign trip in Florida, a state where he was the leader in a three-man race before he decided not to run last summer. Now he's third and losing ground, according to the polls.
All these old boys that used to make a living taking polls are going to be looking for work selling peanuts or something when everybody said you can't give the American people bad news before an election. Well, we laid it right on the table, and look at the size audience that's here today.
The crowd was big and boisterous, especially when Perot hammered away at his favorite target, George Bush.
There is a difference between making computer chips and potato chips, even though the president hadn't figured it out. Number one, he can't win. Number two, with his record, he shouldn't win.
But Bush must win in Florida, and Perot could hurt him here. Later in Kansas City, Perot was greeted by an even bigger crowd, and he continued bashing Bush and the Republicans.
I love the fact George Bush says don't throw away your vote on Ross Perot. I say don't throw away your vote on George Bush.
Perot is still smarting over the fact that he was labeled a quitter last July when he decided not to get into the race. Many of his supporters gathered signatures to get his name on the ballot. This weekend, he's thanking them for that.
I laid $60 million on the table, put my family through hell because I love you and I love this country.
Perot supporters may not have much to celebrate Tuesday night, but he hopes they'll at least be able to say Perot gave us a world-class campaign. Jim Cummins, NBC News, with the Perot campaign in Kansas City.
In every election, voters send a message. Sometimes it's a message of anger or frustration or both, and so it is in this campaign. Candidates who understand the message can use it. Those who don't risk defeat. Tom Pettit shows us the power of the protest vote.
In 1990, New Jersey voters told popular incumbent Senator Bill Bradley he could not take them for granted.
I hear your voices, too.
Bradley barely won re-election.
How much money do I... Is that what you're asking?
In Minnesota, a flamboyant college professor, Paul Wellstone, ousted an incumbent U.S. senator with a message of radical change and protest. The protest vote has been important in American political history. In 1968, it was the Vietnam War and racial strife. Eugene J. McCarthy had a clear message.
Right. I've been one of those who said, stop bombing.
Well, we said that we'd simply end the war. You didn't really have to use much oratory on that. You just said, I'm against it, and people would applaud.
The same year, George Wallace ran for president as a populist, appealing mostly to white working people.
They are the ones that are going to determine the outcome of this election because they are the ones that are sick and tired of things they see.
The protest vote is not always predictable. Frank Mankiewicz was press secretary to Robert Kennedy that same year, 1968.
What the voters were saying was, I'm looking for an enemy of the established order. And now that Robert Kennedy's gone, maybe it's George Wallace.
Wallace really invented the message to Washington, I'm fed up.
The Perot is saying exactly the same thing and articulating that.
Nobody steps up to the plate and accepts responsibility for anything.
There has been a barrage of messages this year, almost an overload of televised messages. Political scientist Martin Seymour Lipset thinks there are two important ones.
But the main message is really fix the economy. The other one is throw the bums out. But if the bums can fix the economy, they can stay around.
The protest vote, Professor Lipset says, is just part of the continuing American political process. Tom Pettit, NBC News, Washington.
And we'll continue our coverage of the election and what lies beyond it in just a moment.
You know what I like best about going on vacation? Eating out. So on this vacation, I'm dining my way from San Juan to St. Thomas, from Guadalupe to Caracas, from Cozumel to Grand Cayman. It's all included in the price. But what I really like about this vacation is that my favorite restaurant goes everywhere I go. Take a 3, 4, or 7-day fun ship vacation on Carnival, the most popular cruise line in the world.
Moms have to get up early to make their rounds.
How's my patient?
They know the way to doctor their family's coughs is with Robitussin. Because more doctors and pharmacists recommend Robitussin than any other cough medicine.
Spoon. Not you, too. Spoon.
I think he's coming down with a math test.
Robitussin, recommended by more doctors, pharmacists, and Dr. Mom. And for your little patient, try Robitussin pediatric cough and cold formulas.
If the economy, and of course that means jobs, is issue one in this election, what happens after it is over? Each candidate has proposals for pushing growth and creating work, but each plan is different. Our chief economics correspondent, Irving R. Levine, looks at what can be done and how long it'll take.
Each candidate is promising to create jobs to revive the economy. But jobs won't come quickly or easily, no matter who wins. These workers are on a project near Dallas under a $150 billion highway bill signed last year by President Bush. Governor Clinton plans to spend more on infrastructure, roads, bridges, railroads. But David Watts, who heads Granite Construction Company, cautions that new infrastructure jobs won't happen overnight.
Really, realistically, is 18 months, 2 years before you finally got jobs out here on projects from an increased expenditure in funds.
Retraining unemployed workers is something else the candidates, particularly Ross Perot, support. But some fear the candidates are underestimating the retraining problem. Bill Walton runs a company that produces training videotapes.
The requirements for the jobs that were there 5 years ago have changed because technology is changing in every area of our economy.
2 million jobs were lost in the recession. Healthcare was the only industry with big job growth, and it came as prices skyrocketed. Clinton proposes reforms to cut medical costs, but that would mean lower profits for pharmaceutical firms, which in turn might lay off workers.
Governor Clinton has endorsed legislation that would penalize pharmaceutical makers by raising their taxes if they increase their prices by more than the cost of living.
Regardless of who wins, two things seem certain. One, a new team will deal with the economy. President Bush has pledged to bring in new faces, as of course would Clinton or Perot. And two, any significant upturn in jobs and the economy isn't in the cards for at least a year. Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Washington.
And speaking of the job market, if President Bush should lose on Tuesday, there will be a lot of jobs opening up in Washington, thousands of them, in fact. That would mean plenty of work, of course, for real estate agents and headhunters, and plenty of worries for those who would have to return to the private sector. Linda Vester is at the White House this evening. Linda?
Garrick, the presidential race may be tight, but quite a few of George Bush's appointees are presuming the worst, that their boss will lose. They are actively looking for work.
Is she in Washington now?
This well-known Washington headhunter is wading through a flood of calls from Bush administration staffers.
Yes, I've had an opportunity to talk to some cabinet officers, sub-cabinet and White House staff and others.
A letter this week from GOP conservatives explains the mood. It says, barring a miracle, Bill Clinton will be elected. More than 3,000 presidential appointees face unemployment, the kind of thing that hasn't happened since Jimmy Carter lost.
Sort of like sheer terror takes place in there. You know the sound that you probably hear in there of typewriters typing or resumes being typed up.
For its part, the Bush campaign has threatened to fire anyone caught looking for work before the election is over.
If anybody in this administration from the top down or the campaign from the top down is spending time on anything other than getting George Bush reelected or their official duties in the case of administration officials, then they should be out in the streets now.
Some staffers are going beyond job hunting and are getting ready to put their homes on the market with realtors like Harriet Pressler.
Have you been contacted by people who are thinking about listing?
Yes, I have. Members of Congress and also members of the administration, but they're not ready to list until the day after the election.
Why not till then?
Well, of course, they don't want the perception of thinking that they're giving up.
Headhunter Ron Walker says, if the president does lose, staffers will find few openings in the private sector and will have a tough transition.
An awful lot of these people came here in 1980 with Reagan, President Reagan and Vice President Bush, and they've been able to stay for 12 years.
If they have to leave, there are others already lining up to take their place. The Clinton campaign says it's receiving resumes by the thousands, and Washington realtors are getting calls from Democrats who think they'll be offered a job in a Clinton administration. Garrick?
Thank you, Linda. Other news today, 5 American nuns are murdered in Africa, and in Texas, a major bank fails. That as we continue.
Like a rock, I was strong as I could be. Like a rock.
First, J.D. Power & Associates ranked Chevrolet the best full-size pickup in initial quality. Now they also report Chevrolet is the best truck line overall in sales satisfaction.
Like a rock.
Chevrolet, the most dependable, longest-lasting trucks on the road.
Like a rock.
Most families have 2 dishwashers. The heavy-duty model pre-washes everything, loads it in the other model, then tackles what didn't fit. But why? With the new Maytag Jet Clean dishwasher, you don't need to wash all your dishes before you wash your dishes. It has a 6-tier racking system that exposes everything to the cleaning power of 43 powerful jets, making your second dishwasher somewhat unnecessary.
You'll get used to it.
Maytag, the dependability people.
Toothpaste to me was basically boring. I used the same stuff for 15 years. And then my daughter brought home Arm & Hammer dental care gel from a slumber party. And what a wonderful feeling. My teeth felt fresh, clean from the dentist, and my mouth felt so healthy. And then I read more dentists recommend Arm & Hammer than any other baking soda toothpaste to help promote healthy teeth and gums. I still see my dentist twice a year. But now I get that fresh from the dentist feeling twice a day. All of a sudden, toothpaste isn't boring anymore.
Get Arm & Hammer dental care for that healthy, fresh from the dentist feeling of clean.
Shocking and appalling. Those are the words from the Department of State today. It's a reaction to the murder of 5 American women. They were nuns living and working in Liberia in West Africa. Their bodies were found shot to death, the victims of the civil war raging there. 2 were killed while trying to help a sick child. The others were murdered outside their convent. These were the victims: Barbara Ann Mutra, age 69, Mary Joelle Comer, she was 58, also her cousin Shirley Comer, who was 61, Kathleen McGuire, 54, and Agnes Miller, who was 62 years old. The missionaries all belonged to an order in Ruma, Illinois, near St. Louis. Well, coming back to this country in a different story, in Texas, a big bank failure announced. Federal regulators have closed down the First City Bank Corporation in that state. First City is one of the largest banks in Texas, but when depositors tried to get their money today, they couldn't. Regulators said that too many bad loans made the bank insolvent. Callers were told that in most cases, deposits would be covered by federal insurance. This latest bailout will cost taxpayers about $500 million. And on Focus this evening, another issue involving our money, loans, specifically second mortgages. And Jeff Madrick is here to tell us how some people are paying exorbitant rates, can and indeed do end up losing their homes.
Well, Garrick, most often the victims are minorities. New federal studies suggest that many traditional lenders neglect or even avoid low-income and minority neighborhoods. And that, critics say, makes homeowners in these neighborhoods ready customers for lenders who charge unusually high interest rates.
Black homeowners in Atlanta have become such frequent targets of unscrupulous lenders that counselors regularly hold community meetings to issue warnings and to help people who are already in trouble.
But I just want to put you on alert. At least now you know you end up with monthly payments that you can't afford. By telling
the victims are homeowners who take out high-interest second mortgages to pay off debts. 41-year-old Essie Mae Hector, mother of 3, agreed to a second mortgage at 27.5% to pay off debts left by her mother. Unable to make the payments, she's now fighting foreclosure and the loss of her $40,000 house.
I think what they really want is your property.
Legal aid lawyers say such practices are proliferating in minority neighborhoods throughout the country. Investigations have been undertaken by attorneys general in 6 separate states.
In the second mortgage business, experts warn consumers against lenders who charge interest rates of 18% and more, who charge large fees up front, who get big penalties if the loan is paid off early, and who build in future charges known as balloon payments. Legal aid lawyer Karen Brown says be suspicious of anyone soliciting door-to-door or by phone.
The classic victims are the elderly, minority homeowners, people with low income and high equity in their homes.
Aren't they ready to close on a loan?
Actually, they are.
Banker Charles Scheid runs a consortium of 10 Atlanta banks which provide low-interest loans in disadvantaged communities. He says homeowners need to be much better informed.
We realized education was needed, and we started an education program. And everyone that gets a loan through the consortium has to go through our education program.
Now, there are free mortgage counseling services in most major cities around the country. Tomorrow, we will look at an alternative to high-rate second mortgages not many people know about. It's called a reverse mortgage, and it's a way for retirees to get the equity out of their house. Garrick?
Thanks, Jeff. Also today, a dispute finally resolved. Galileo Galilei was the first man to study the sun and the planets through a telescope, and he discovered that the Earth revolved around the sun. That was not religiously correct for the Catholic Church back in 1633, and the Inquisition ordered him to recant. He did. So finally today, Pope John Paul formally proclaimed that Galileo was right, the Church was wrong, and that the matter was now settled.
In the mountains of Colombia, rain breathes richness into the land. And the land gives its richness to the coffee. That's why Maxwell House blends its coffees with Colombian beans. Rich beans, rich coffee. Some have old-fashioned richness. Some have deep French flavor. Maxwell House uses more Colombian beans than anyone in America. The coffees of Maxwell House, blended with Colombian beans, because better beans make better coffee.
You've been dieting with a very special day in mind, which could mean you're not getting your daily amount of protein, because many foods that provide protein are also high in fat. But not this one, Kellogg's Special K, the only cereal that's fat-free and a good source of protein. So make Special K part of your future plans and get into that dress you've been dying to wear. Kellogg's Special K. Get the protein, lose the fat.
So in my interview, they told me how Dow can take all this coal and turn it into clean burning gas.
Wouldn't that cut down on acid rain?
You got it.
Sounds like one serious job, son. I just wish it wasn't so far away.
Gonna miss you, Mike.
Hey, take care of this for me.
You can make a difference in what tomorrow brings.
Son, show them what you got.
'Cause Dow lets you do great things.
If you suffer from awful sinus attacks, try Dristan Sinus. Unlike these, Dristan Sinus has a decongestant and the modern pain reliever ibuprofen to relieve sinus pain, all without drowsiness. Dristan Sinus, the face of relief today.
Time now for politics this week. Most of our attention in this series has been on the presidential race, but on Tuesday, people will also be voting on issues directly. Call them initiatives, propositions, or referenda. They are those items on the ballot which give voters the power usually held only by their elected officials. Often it begins with petitions being signed. In effect, people making laws directly, bypassing state legislatures and Congress. On Tuesday, there will be major ballot initiatives in 40 states and the District of Columbia. The most popular targets are politicians, members of Congress and state legislatures. Efforts to limit the number of terms they may serve are on the ballots in 16 states. More than any other issue put to direct vote, term limits show the mood of the country. Former Congressman James Coyne heads a national bipartisan group advocating term limits.
With term limits, we have an example of Congress refusing to face up to its duty, and the voters feel that they have to come to some sort of agreement among themselves as to what direction the country should go.
The term limits are favored to pass, but those limiting congressional terms may require a constitutional amendment. In many states, voters will act on emotionally charged issues. Abortion is on the ballot in 2 states. In Maryland, the initiative would guarantee a woman's right to an abortion.
Most of us defy simplistic labels like pro-choice or pro-life.
In Arizona, a proposition would outlaw abortion in all but a very few cases. Gay rights are being challenged in 2 states, Colorado and Oregon. The initiative in Oregon declares homosexuality to be, quote, abnormal, wrong, unnatural, and perverse. Other personal rights will also be put to the vote. In Kansas, there's a campaign for guaranteed rights for victims of crimes, including being heard in court before the sentencing of a convicted criminal. Similar victims' rights measures will be voted on in 4 states. And in California, a vote on the right to die, to allow doctors to assist in the suicide of a terminally ill person. The question in all these cases is, who should legislate? The people directly or their elected officials? There is no question that the members of Congress are hearing the message. They know there already is a system of term limitation. It's called Election Day on Tuesday. And I'll be back with some final thoughts.
Introducing new waterproof formula bathroom duck. The only multi-surface bathroom cleaner that waterproofs as it cleans to resist dirt buildup. Like water up a duck's back. Watch how dirty water just slides off the side, cleaned with bathroom duck. Its unique waterproofing formula resists dirt buildup to make cleaning easier. New bathroom duck. Nothing fights bathroom dirt like duck. From S.C. Johnson Wax.
When your sinus and nasal congestion feels this bad, what can you do? Last year, you wanted to call the doctor. Last year, you wanted a prescription. But this year, Tavist-D in its full prescription strength is available without a prescription. Just 1 tablet helps relieve 12 hours worth of painful congestion and sneezing.
Guess what? I'll be there after all.
Tavist-D. 1 tablet, 12 hours, and now no prescription.
In art, matters of taste are often subjective. But in life, good taste is well defined. Fancy Feast gourmet cat food in the gold single-serving can. Exceptionally moist, uniquely delicious. For a gourmet taste to satisfy even the most discriminating connoisseurs. Fancy Feast. Good taste is easy to recognize.
There's a smart way to doctor a cough. Robitussin cough drops.
Try this, it works.
With an active ingredient that speeds soothing relief to your cough.
Try this. It works.
Robitussin cough drops. Cough drops from the cough experts.
And finally this evening, it's said that the only poll which counts is the one on Election Day. If so, why are we being flooded, even drowned in polls? New ones, it seems, coming out every day as the presidential race comes down to the wire. Well, you're probably saying, silly question. There are polls because there are pollsters skilled in taking them, news organizations willing to pay for them, and after all, horse races, even political ones, are exciting. True. And polls are accurate, and part of a journalist's job is to present all relevant information. And yet, what happens when poll mania takes hold, when the polls themselves begin to dominate the campaign as they are now, from the reporting on television to the talk around the office water cooler? The campaign becomes even more frenzied. The debate over substance is pushed aside as nervous candidates try to influence the polls and those powerful last-minute perceptions created when the results are made public. Is there a better way? Well, a few weeks ago, I covered an important vote in France. There was nonstop polling there until the final week. Then, by law, no poll could be made public. And you know what happened? In the final days of the campaign, people were talking not about which side was ahead, but rather about what was at stake. And perhaps that's something to keep in mind for our next election campaign. I'm Garrick Utley. Good night for NBC News.
It's NBC Halloween Saturday. Here and now, out all night, empty nest and nurses all trapped in Halloween horror. Superstar Hammer spins his magic. It's a Hammer Halloween. A night so scary, Dreyfus runs away to the nurses.
He howled for you. I'm flattered.
It's NBC Halloween Saturday tonight.
Next week on Today, Election Day and the race for the White House.
We'll have continuous coverage of election returns and hear from all 3 presidential candidates.
Join us next week on Today.
Coming up next from News Center 13, a gruesome discovery for a Des Moines woman.
She finds her pet cat dead and mutilated alongside her apartment building. I'm Mary Mills. I'll have details.
Slick roads and poor visibility may have played a part in this fatal accident in Warren County.
And it was 1 year ago this weekend. 6 people die when a disgruntled student goes on a shooting rampage in Iowa City. We'll look back.
Jerry says more of the same, and Pat with the Cyclones and the Hawks, all coming up next.
We didn't ask for it, but unless something is done, every household in Polk County is going to pay higher property taxes just to keep prairie meadows like this empty. At least now you have a choice. You can continue to pay for prairie meadows, or you can vote yes to pass Public Measure A. Stop the Prairie Meadows tax train with the first step toward taxpayer relief in Polk County. Public Measure A. We either pass it or we pay. Vote yes Election Day.
Elaine Baxter believes it's time to take a stand for a woman's right to choose. Elaine Baxter is pro-choice. She believes women should make their own decisions, and that government should stay out of people's private lives and personal decisions. Jim Ross Lightfoot takes an extreme position. He wants government to ban abortions, even when the woman has been the victim of a rape or incest. The difference is clear. It's time to take a stand.
Live from WHO TV 13, where the news comes first 24 hours a day. Scott Pope, Therese Thompson, Pat Paris with sports, and Jerry Reno with the weather. This is News Center 13 at 6.
A gruesome discovery for a Des Moines family today. The pet cat they lost was found dead and maimed. And a one-car accident in southern Warren County claims one life. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We'll have more on that fatal accident and the weather coming up.
But our top story tonight, a grisly discovery by a Des Moines woman. She found her pet black cat mutilated next to her apartment building today. Nancy Fockert says her cat Kitty, had been missing for 2 weeks. This morning, she found Kitty next to her apartment building with both eyes gouged out. Tonight, police are investigating, and Fockert is offering a reward for information leading to the arrest of the person responsible. Fockert says she has no idea who or why anyone would do this, but she fears it could be related to Halloween.
News Center 13's Mary Mills spoke with her this afternoon. She joins us now from the newsroom. Mary, what are her thoughts on all of this?
Well, Therese, the cat was black, and as you know, there are superstitions associated with black cats and Halloween. In fact, many shelters will not adopt out black animals at the end of October. Either way, today's discovery was very upsetting for Nancy Fockert. It's hard enough when a pet dies, let alone knowing someone tortured it.
Here.
Nancy Fockert couldn't believe it. Her 3-year-old black cat, Kitty, missing for 2 weeks, was dead. Worse yet, she was mutilated.
Most of its body was intact, but its eyes were taken out, so it was terrible. Terrible to find.
Fockert says the cat, her only pet, meant the world to her. After Kitty's disappearance, she walked the neighborhood posting dozens of missing signs.
Like for the last 2 weeks, there was one on the front and back of each of these posts.
Fockert says she can't help but wonder if Kitty's mutilation was related to some cruel Halloween prank.
So blown away by it, I really can't think straight about it. I just don't understand what motivates people to do this sort of thing.
She and family members buried Kitty here this morning. She says they wanted a nice ending to something so awful.
I wish that the people that had done this would realize what a valuable thing they've taken away from me.
And again, there is no way to confirm the Halloween connection. Fockert says she wants other pet owners to beware. She certainly doesn't want other people having to go through what she went through. Therese?
Actually, it's me, Mary. She is offering a reward. Is there anything else being done to help find the person responsible?
Well, they have reported the incident to police. It's hard to say whether they can do anything. And as you say, her family members are offering a reward. In fact, they've gathered about $500, which will be given to anyone with information. You can call Julie Lowe at 277-3361, and hopefully they will find something out about this.
All right, Mary Mills reporting for us. Thank you. A woman who had been missing since 8 o'clock last night found this afternoon. She'd been killed in a single-car accident in Warren County. The Jaws of Life were brought in to get 40-year-old Danetta Mozaikis, her body, out of the car. The car was discovered by passing motorists in a deep ditch on Highway 6569. Mozaikis left her New Virginia home around 8 o'clock last night and had been missing ever since. The incident remains under investigation by the Iowa State Patrol.
It's been a busy day on the campaign trail. Vice President Dan Quayle was in Cedar Rapids today and on the end of a 4-day stumping sweep, calling for 4 more years. And Barbara Bush, she'll be here in Des Moines tomorrow night. Now, over in Davenport today, another visit from Democratic presidential nominee Bill Clinton. His main campaign theme today has been the economy. He's touting his plan as the road to recovery. Now, Clinton is also making appearances in Wisconsin today on his Midwest campaign sweep. Like we said, it's been a busy day in politics all the way around, both nationally and locally. Although Iowa has only 7 electoral votes, both Bush and Clinton have been campaigning in and around the state. And they say that every state counts with 3 days before the election. News Center 13's Courtney Maxwell looks back at a busy week in politics.
On Saturday, Bill Clinton made his 3rd campaign stop in Iowa. He told a crowd estimated at 13,000 that it's time for change. On Monday, it was the president's turn. George Bush arrived for a whirlwind 16-hour visit that included a live interview with Bryant Gumbel for NBC's Today Show and a rally at the convention center.
And they know that we are the leader of the world, and we are not, as Governor Clinton says, a nation in decline.
On Wednesday, the Bush campaign woke up to good news. The headline, latest figures showed the economy was growing, and a new poll found George Bush suddenly in a tight race with Bill Clinton. Thursday was the beginning of crunch time for local campaigns. Volunteers worked the phones, distributed leaflets, and pushed to get voters to listen to their cause. On Friday, Phyllis Schlafly and Eleanor Smeal came to Des Moines to debate the Iowa ERA. Conservative Schlafly said the ERA will result in same-sex marriages and more abortions. Feminist Smeal said opponents are using lies and fear to try and defeat the ERA. Only 3 more days until Election Day. In Des Moines, Courtney Maxwell, News Center 13.
It was 1 year ago this weekend. Iowa City and the entire nation rocked by the shooting deaths of 5 faculty members at the University of Iowa. All of them gunned down by this man, Gang Liu, a graduate student in the physics department at the school. Authorities say he was angry after being passed over for an academic award. Gang Liu entered the physics building that Friday afternoon and went room to room, shooting the faculty members and administrators that he felt were responsible for passing him over for the award. He then shot himself. There was one survivor, Mia Ciasone, a student who was working part-time as a clerk for one of the victims. This is Mia Ciasone today, paralyzed from the neck down. She says she could forgive Gang Liu, the man responsible, if he were still alive.
It should be on the people who died, the victims, the professors, Lynn Washon and Clary, and just to remember what their life achievements were, just how they would have, just remember their legacy and what they left behind, and to not dwell too much, I guess, on the tragedy, to try and take out what's positive out of it.
Mia is continuing her studies at the university. Her doctors say she will likely be paralyzed the rest of her life. 1 year ago this weekend was also marked by one of the most vicious early season winter storms Iowans had seen in some time.
The storm caught many people by surprise and virtually paralyzed the state for more than 24 hours. It began with an ice storm on Friday, and what started out as rain in the early afternoon turned to ice by sunset. Freezing rain clung to the tree branches and the power poles. Now, the added weight brought hundreds of high-tension power poles crashing to the ground. The downed lines left some central Iowans without electricity for almost 2 weeks. Repairing the damage cost Iowa Power millions. And the ice also clung to roads and bridges, and driving was a nerve-wracking experience. Sights like this of fishtailing cars and trucks were common. Hundreds of accidents were reported. Well, a gloomy day around here, weather-wise, marked by lots of fog and drizzle. If you headed downtown today, you didn't see much of the city view. The principal tower, the Ruan building, both were shrouded in heavy fog. Now, besides the fog, the steady drizzle fell through most of the metro today. Umbrellas, raincoats, a must for getting around. Speaking of trying to get around, it was wet driving out on the roads. It's been a while since windshield wipers were needed. Had a few accidents today, too.
I'd say it's been almost, what, 3 to 4 weeks since we've had any measurable precipitation.
Yeah,
It looks like
dry.
we're going to make up for it in the next 3 or 4 days. Jerry Reno in the Weather Center with the first look at the forecast. Jerry?
Yeah, I look back at the record, Scott. It was October 8th, our last measurable precipitation. We've had a couple days of a trace or so. In 1991, we had 14 inches of snow during the month of November here in Des Moines, but today it's rain. Take a look at our radar covering about the 2/3 of the state with light rain, drizzle, and fog. So we'll tell you what's coming up. Our forecast tonight calls for more of the same. A dismal beggar's night, a low tomorrow morning near 40. Complete details when we come back.
All right, we'll see you then. Thanks, Jerry. Still to come from your 24-hour news source, a new bird flies into Des Moines for the first time today. More on that when we come back.
And merchants cashing in on one of the biggest tourism days of the year. We'll explain when the news continues.
Nelson's Diamonds in Ankeny will help you pick out the perfect gift of fine jewelry, even if it is your first purchase. The friendly staff at Nelson's Diamonds will take the mystery out of buying wedding rings, diamonds, emeralds.